Well, hello and welcome to this edition of Mining Journal America's Mining Agenda. I'm Richard Roberts, Group Editor of Mining Journal. And today it's my pleasure to welcome Stan Wholley to the Mining Agenda. Stan's in Toronto. Stan's the President of Americas of CSA Global, one of the world's leading mining and geological consulting firms. He's been with CSA for many years and recently relocated from Australia with his family to Toronto to lead the company's expansion there. CSA acquired respected Canadian consultancy ACA Howe last year, adding to its presence in Vancouver. Stan, we've all just come away from the PDAC event in Toronto. There seemed to be a pretty positive vibe in the Investors Exchange area among the many small companies there, and also in the service company exhibition area. What were your main takeaways from PDAC this year, and how would you assess the mood among some of the companies you work with?
Thanks, Richard. Thanks for having me on. Look, it was a great PDAC. If you compare last year's mood to this year's mood, it was really good. I think, this time last year we were still in the depths of despair. I think now most people can see, if not a light at the end of the tunnel, in some cases we're even out of the tunnel, would be my take on it. I think there's been an opening of the purse strings for equity and risk money to come back into the resources sector, and that's welcome. So there was a lot of, I guess, sort of companies from the junior end were a lot happier. I think there's still a lot of cautious optimism in Canada, whereas I think in Australia perhaps it's full-blown optimism, and maybe that's a comment on the Australian versus Canadian psyche, or perhaps it's just a measure of the maturity of the two markets even. But look, I mean, our client base is a mixture of all commodities. We work in gold, we work in the battery metals, we work in base metals, and all of them are seeing an uptick in commodity prices, and that's making it easier for all of them to do their business.
Yeah, you're, as in CSA Global, you're something of a lead indicator on many fronts of activity in the industry. We're seeing by some measures significant increases in drilling activity and project studies being filed. This is across jurisdictions, and that's on the back of the funding coming through equity markets and other sources. What does the current demand for the services and the types of services you're providing say about where we're at currently in the mining investment cycle, in your view?
Look, I think we're very much getting towards that sort of, 6:30 or 7 o'clock on the clock. We're starting to see more mergers and acquisitions. We're seeing some quite big ones getting underway globally. Both on the, AMEC has just been taken out by Wood. We've seen some quite big investments by Vedanta's parent company into Anglo. And from our clients, we've seen very much a shift towards exploration, which is a great sign. Our exploration team is busy, and that's a global business. Everywhere we have a team with exploration skills, they're all busy. And it's refreshing that it's no longer just near mine exploration. There's actually companies getting out and doing some greenfields work. A lot of our customer base for the last few years, while things have been a bit tough, have been very much concentrated on, I guess, production optimization. So we've had teams, in optimizing operations and looking for productivity improvements. A lot of them have made those improvements, and now got the benefit of an uptick in commodity prices. So a lot of the gold players, particularly, are sitting on some quite nice piles of cash, and they're starting to go out and look for the next phase of growth projects in the market. So we're starting to see more due diligence being done, and also a number of IPOs, some in Canada, some in Australia. So it's all pretty good news, really. And our resources team equally is quite busy on the back of sort of some of the exploration, particularly done in the sort of battery metal space over the last, let's say, 18 months. Most of those graphite players are now moving their projects towards PFS and DFS, the ones that found some nice deposits anyway. And in the lithium and cobalt space, there's been a lot of people out pegging ground, doing initial drill programs, and they're now converting those into resources. So it very much does look like, a recovery which is real and has some sustenance to it.
And given your background and the international breadth of CSA's activities, are there any striking differences between what you're seeing in North America and what you saw in Australia and perhaps in other parts of the world? How would you characterise those differences, if there are any?
Yeah, I sort of alluded to it previously. I think Australia probably led the way out of, well, maybe recognised the signs earlier and jumped on board with them. It probably reflects the maturity of the market. Like our market in Australia is very much exploration focused. Of course, we've got a number of large major companies on there as well, but we are a country of explorers in Australia. And I think with the sort of new metals and some of these battery metals that were coming into the market, Australia really went for those quite quickly. And I think, I would say has probably led the world into those markets. Canada is certainly on board with that, but I think is a little behind us. I think the TSXV is more like the ASX in that it's got a big exploration focus, and I think that's probably had a more vigorous return to good times than perhaps some of the other than the TSX mainboard, and I think that probably reflects the maturity of the TSX. It's got a lot of big companies, and they are naturally cautious on the way up and on the way down. And I think we're seeing a big return, and that's from Australian companies and Canadian companies into Africa. We've got a number of quite good and sizable projects there, both in the exploration and resource development and sort of PFS level studies.
Okay, I heard a few references at PDAC, and I guess they echoed some of the references that I've heard in other forums of late about the lack of quality projects, copper, zinc, even gold projects in development pipelines. I'm really interested in your view, given the breadth of what you see in the market, whether you agree with that observation, or do you see more good projects coming through than are perhaps being talked about by others? What's your perspective on that?
Look, I think we've come through what I would say is the worst exploration drought that I've seen in my 25 years as a geologist, and really no one has done any meaningful exploration for 5 years, let's say. You can't expect to have a great pipeline of projects coming through if you don't go out and do exploration. It just doesn't happen. One thing leads to another. That being said, I think there are some still good projects coming through the pipeline. I think gold is there doesn't appear to be any massive large ones out there that are currently in development. It must be said, and same for copper. But there are some, known projects in copper. You've got Tampakan sitting in the Philippines, which is, it's a difficult place to actually get projects up, but it can be done. There's others that have demonstrated it can be done. Gold, Gold Roads. I'd say that's it's a nice project. I haven't seen any, nice big plus 10 million ounces. And perhaps that's, again, a sign of the times. You can't expect a never-ending supply of near-surface, high-quality projects. And that, to me, is the next step that, as an industry, we have to come to terms with. And I think we are coming to terms with it by looking deeper, looking undercover, looking in places that have been difficult to look before, but, are prospective. I think we're seeing a resurgence of gold exploration in the northern parts of Canada, in Ontario, and in Quebec, and I think that's good news. What we really need, though, is some good exploration funding to get in behind that and find those next big discoveries. So, of course, it is an issue, but I think it's an issue that our industry can surmount with some good good old-fashioned hard work and exploration.
Okay, Stan, we just come through a bit of a block of key industry events. Is there anything in particular coming up on your calendar?
Look, CSA always has a very busy calendar globally. I'm off to Mexico next week as part of our growth strategy into Latin America, so I'm heading down for the Discoveries Conference. I know some of the others in the group are looking at, I guess, more regional conferences in their own jurisdictions. So yeah, look, the thing is, we're now really pretty busy, which is great, and I think that's a happy time for the industry. And when we get busy, we tend to focus on our clients' needs rather than our own. So that's really where our focus is at the moment. So yeah, I think if you keep an eye online on Twitter or Facebook, our marketing department will tell anyone who's interested where we're likely to be.
Excellent, Stan. Thanks very much for joining us on the Mining Agenda this week, and thank you for everyone for listening.
Thanks,
More
Richard.
Mining Agenda coming up soon. Thank you.